Let's now look at a concept closely linked to architecture repository, the Enterprise Continuum. Enterprise Continuum is a bit of a controversial topic because of the confusing wordings and lack of clear specifications describing it in the TOGAF specification. Nevertheless, it holds a significant position within the specification and is therefore definitely worth discussing. Let's for a moment consider the architecture repository. As the architecture capability starts operating over several months, for example, hundreds or even thousands of artifacts get added to the repository from across the enterprise, and they typically represent all kinds of things that are being architected. It is also important to note that architecture is highly context sensitive, and in order to make sense of a given context, it is often required to view the issues in the light of the bigger picture and consider the holistic enterprise, and sometimes even incorporate concerns that are common to an entire industry or economy, for example. And it often becomes onerous for anyone trying to get the complete picture to wade through the contents of the architecture repository to have all the pieces of the puzzle arranged in the right order to assemble the big picture view and to enable moving between multiple architectural contexts. Hence, the purpose, as stated in TOGAF, for Enterprise Continuum is to create this layer of abstraction over the architecture repository and present a view that enables the architecture assets of the enterprise to be viewed from the most generic to the most specific architectures and solutions from left to right, thereby enabling users of the repository to traverse across multiple architectural contexts and be able to communicate effectively in reference to which context they are referring to at a point in time. In addition to providing quicker access to information, this mechanism can enable greater reuse of architectural assets, greater standards compliance, and greater overall agility. For example, consider a bank adopting a cloud-centric computing model. It might use a cloud ecosystem reference model as a foundation reference architecture and look at using some of the service offerings from AWS or Azure to provide a common systems architecture as an approach for building out its systems on the cloud infrastructure. It might then identify a banking industry specific reference architecture such as BIAN, which stands for Banking Industry Architecture Network, as an industry specific reference architecture, and then further create its organization specific architecture by leveraging and customizing these generic architecture models instead of inventing everything from the scratch. For example, say an architect is working to solve a specific problem, such as, for example, say a single sign-on architecture, can browse through the continuum of architectural artifacts to look for any precedents, patterns, or best practice guidance that he or she can leverage before attempting to solve the problem all by himself or herself from the scratch, thereby leveraging existing architecture and solution building blocks and potentially reducing complexity and the cost overall for the enterprise. Enterprise Continuum finds expression in EA tools as a virtual repository on top of the actual architectural repository. And you can expect to see different levels of sophistication in their offerings to support this mechanism. With that, we come to the end of this module. And in the next section, we will take a quick walkthrough of everything that we have covered in this course before we wrap up this course.